member of Cedars, the Reverend Barry Andrews. Thanks to the setup team for making this space ready for us this morning. Also, thanks to the tech team and the sound team for making everyone able to hear and see this, even though it seems like the two teams have merged since they're sitting in the same spot. Thanks to the tech audio team. Without the effort of all these volunteers, these services would not be possible. And I'd like to thank each one of you for being here this morning. Without you, the efforts of these volunteers would not be necessary. Before we move further into the service, let's pause to acknowledge that members of our congregation occupy the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Coast Salish tribes. The homelands of the Suquamish, Duwamish, Klallam, and Chimicum peoples were ceded under duress through the Point Elliott and Point No Point treaties. We affirm indigenous sovereignty both past and present. This acknowledgement does not serve as a substitute to build authentic relationships with the members of the modern-day members of these tribes and to learn about their living culture and history. Cedars is committed to being a welcoming and inclusive community. In all the beauty of languages, cultures, and skin tones that come together in your uniqueness, we welcome you. In all the ways you experience and express gender, in the beauty of who and how you love, we welcome you. With all the religious and ethical traditions that inform your spiritual life, we welcome you. You are invited to join us today and always with an open heart, an open mind, a loving heart, and willing hands. Now, let us enter a time of centering as Audrey Blair shares Prelude Number 5 by Catherine Rowland.
Good morning. It's a pleasure for me to be with you in person today. I know that we've been well served by virtual worship during a long and difficult time, and I certainly welcome all of you who are visiting with us virtually today. But it does feel so much better, certainly for me as a minister, to be able to see my audience. And I welcome the opportunity today to be with you. For our call to worship, I offer these words by the American naturalist and nature writer John Burroughs. The lesson which life repeats and constantly enforces is look underfoot. You are always nearer to the divine and the true sources of your power than you think. The lure of distant and difficult is deceptive. The great opportunity is where you are. Do not despise your place and hour. Every place is under the stars. Every place is the center of the world. And our first hymn for this morning, which is not in your order of service, but which I would like to invite you to join in singing as you place a mask over your mouth, is hymn number 347, Gather the Spirit.
You may rise as you are willing and able. That was hymn number 347, Gather the Spirit, accompanied by Audrey Blair.
Shortly after the beginning of the pandemic, I was imagining how it might lead to the end of civilization, and I had a panic attack. This was on March 11th, 2020. Looking for some way to assuage myself, I turned to that brand of philosophy, which to me has always seemed to most well capture the human condition: existentialism. In summary, the tenets of existentialism tell each person: 1, you exist; 2, all the suffering and despair that you could possibly want are yours for the asking; and 3, well, no, that's really about it. The attempts to systematize this philosophy, for example, Martin Heidegger's 1927 book, Being and Time, or Jean Paul Sartre's 1943 book, Being and Nothingness, are to me mostly incomprehensible. My understanding comes from the fiction of the existentialist philosophers. So, a couple of months into the pandemic, looking for solace, I started rereading perhaps the most cheerful novel in this genre, Albert Camus' The Plague. The book is set in the Algerian city of Oran in the 1940s during an outbreak of the actual plague, the Black Death, caused by the bacteria Yersinia pestis. But even if you haven't read the book, some of the characters will sound familiar. There is the Parisian journalist who tries various things to break the quarantine and return to Paris and his girlfriend, thinking nothing of the possibility that he will take the plague with him and kill her. There is the minister who preaches that the plague is a punishment sent by God. And then there are the local officials who want to make sure that the outbreak is not sensationalized for fear of ruining the economy. Really, this is Camus' description of what will happen in your society if you happen to live through a pandemic. The main character is the doctor, who has a name I can't pronounce. It's French. It's spelled R-I-E-U-X. Before Oran is put under quarantine, the doctor's wife leaves to go to a sanitarium. She has tuberculosis, and she is going to die. So throughout the months and months that the doctor is tending to the sick for 18 and 20 hours a day, he has nothing to hope for himself, nothing to hope for, and everything to fear. And yet, knowing that his actions are certainly futile, he persists. What else is there for him to do? He is a doctor, and he cares for people who are sick and suffering. Camus doesn't mention the doctor ever having a single panic attack. I dedicate the lighting of our flaming chalice to living your philosophy. Please join with me in repeating our affirmation. As we come together to worship, we remind ourselves to treat all people kindly because we are one family, to take good care of the earth because it is our home, and to live lives full of love and goodness, because that is how we will all become the best that we can be.
D.B. Johnson is an illustrator and writer who's written a series of books about a bear by the name of Henry, who bears a remarkable resemblance to another Henry I know, Henry David Thoreau, a New England writer who lived 200 years ago. Well, these Henry books, and there's a whole series of them, they deal with various episodes from Thoreau's life, building a cabin, the night he spent in jail, and the hike to Fitchburg. This one is a little different. This is Henry's Night. Now, this is a story about awareness. And it's a story that's set in the middle of the night. Now, a lot of folks would think that it would be difficult to walk or hike in the middle of a dark night. But you know, our eyes have cones and rods. The cones help us to see during the day, and the rods help us to see at night. And I speak as one who has actually taken midnight hikes in the dark without a flashlight. In fact, a flashlight ruins everything. But the rods enable your eyes to adjust to the dim, I was going to say dim light, but I've walked when there wasn't any light at all. Now, everything is a little indistinct, I might add, as illustrated in these pictures from the book. Now, my wife Linda is going to help me with this by reading the text, and I'll turn the pages. So this is Henry's Night, and you might try to put yourself into kind of a meditative mood as you listen to this, and imagine yourselves out in the middle of the night walking.
I cannot sleep. The sounds of the village keep me awake. The evening train whistles, dogs bark, and from the room below, voices drift up to me. If only I could hear the song the night bird sings. I take my collecting jar and go down the stairs. The branches of my beech tree bend and pull me in. I sit up to my chin in night and listen for the bird. All I hear are berry pickers coming home from the hills and the village bell tolling, bong, 9 o'clock. The night bird does not sing here. I slide down from the tree and leave the village. Now I walk on the dirt road, crunch, crunch, crunch. The scuffing of my boots is loud. So I step into a field to listen for the night song. I hear nothing. The meadow twinkles with fireflies. They float around me, blinking on and off like shooting stars. I capture fireflies. They fill my jar with light. A bird swoops low to my lantern, and I ask, "Are you the one who sings the song of night?" "Peent." "Not I," the nighthawk says as it wings into the woods. I run after it, spilling fireflies as I go. The village clock strikes 10. "10 o'clock already?" I stride off into the woods toward the rising moon. I walk on and on as the moon grows brighter. There is no path. Far off, I hear a bird sing, "Whippoorwill, whippoorwill, whippoorwill." There is the song of night. The bird calls me to follow. Uphill and down, I follow the nightbird's song. Each time I get close, it stops singing. Now I hear a pumper bird gulping water in the brook. "Which way did the whippoorwill go?" I ask. "Woonka-chunk, woonka-chunk." "It flew far from the village," the pumper bird tells me. So I fill my jar with water and hike deeper into the woods. The village clock strikes 12. When I hear the night bird again, it calls from ahead, then from behind. It leads me in circles. Now it sings from beyond the hill. I hurry on to see the bird. "Wait for me, whippoorwill." A tree root trips me. My jar rolls away into a swamp. I scoop up my jar from the muddy bottom to see tadpoles wiggling in the moonlight. All around me, frogs croak. "Have you seen the whippoorwill?" I ask. "Trunk, trunk." "No one ever sees that bird," a frog tells me. Very far away, the village clock strikes 2. Clouds erase the moon.
There we go.
Is that thunder I hear? Raindrops bounce from my hat. Lightning flashes in the jar. I leap from grassy mound to grassy mound across the swamp. Rain falls hard now, but it will not stop me. Let it pour down. I will see the bird that no one sees. Wind blows me uphill. Brambles grab my hat, and rain soaks me. I cannot hear the bell in the village anymore. From a hemlock tree, an owl calls, "Hoo, hoo, 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 who cooks for you?" "Owl," I ask, "am I lost?" The owl does not say, so I walk on. The rain stops. Here where the woods end, all is quiet. White fog spreads wide. It rolls from edge to edge of all I see. How will I get home? I make a raft of branches and push off into the mist. I bend down and scoop a feather into my jar. At my back, something flutters. Something sits on my head. "Whippoorwill, whippoorwill, whippoorwill," it sings into my ear. The nightbird has found me. I feel the beat of its bird heart. Past 2 islands I paddle. The raft, the fog, the bird's song, and I, all are as light as morning. The bird leaves me. A bush poking above the fog snags my raft. Down through leaves I tumble. Is this the beech tree in my yard? I slide down its branches to the ground. No one hears me going up the stairs. I lie in bed and wait for the noise of the morning train. Instead comes a call. "Whippoorwill, whippoorwill, whippoorwill," the song of night. The notes flow from my jar and fill the day with the nightbird's song. I sleep.
For our spiritual moment, I have a poem by Mary Oliver. It's called "When Death Comes." When death comes, like the hungry bear in autumn, when death comes and takes all the bright coins from his purse to buy me and snaps the purse shut, when death comes like the measles pox, when death comes like an iceberg between the shoulder blades, I want to step through the door full of curiosity, wondering what is it going to be like, that cottage of darkness. And therefore I look upon everything as a brotherhood and a sisterhood, and I look upon time as no more than an idea, and I consider eternity as another possibility. And I think of each life as a flower, as common as a field daisy, and as singular, and each name a comfortable music in the mouth, trending as all music does towards silence. In each body, a lion of courage and something precious to the earth. When it's over, I want to say, all my life I was a bride to amazement. I was the bridegroom taking the world into my arms. When it's over, I don't want to wonder if I made my life something particular and real. I don't want to find myself sighing and frightened or full of argument. I don't want to end up simply having visited this world.
Now is that time in the service where we pass the baskets in an effort to sustain this organization. We have an opportunity here to witness the mystery of how emptying our pockets simultaneously fills our hearts. If you are visiting for the first time, please feel free to let the baskets pass you by. You are a guest, and we are happy simply that you are with us. Would the ushers come forward to collect the offering? Thank you for your gifts.
Spring has a way of tricking us into thinking all's right with the world in spite of the morning's headlines. We feel the sap rising within us, but we feel guilty about it because we know that the climate is out of control. Innocent people are dying in war, and inequality has led to poverty and homelessness. What are we to make of this dilemma? The writer E.B. White put it this way: It's hard to know when to respond to the seductiveness of the world and when to respond to its challenge. If the world were merely seductive, that would be easy. If it were merely challenging, that would be no problem. But I arise in the morning torn between the desire to improve the world and a desire to enjoy the world. This makes it hard to plan the day. 2 weeks ago, Linda and I were enjoying a walk in Blowdale Gardens. As you know, it's quite beautiful this time of year. It was a bright, sunny day. The flowers, the bushes, and the trees were all blooming in a dazzling array of colors. We stood on the deck of the Japanese house and looked out over the garden, so serene and lovely in the mid-morning light. Linda, who has better hearing than me, overheard the conversation of two couples sitting on the benches behind us. A person in one of the couples was sure that the stock market was going to collapse sometime next year and that inflation would continue to rise. A person in the other couple was convinced that COVID wasn't going away and that things would continue to get worse. After all we've been through the last 3 years, I can understand why people are fearful and depressed. And I have no way of knowing what might happen in the future. I'm more hopeful than the people Linda overheard on the deck. But I've been thinking a lot about my philosophy of life and whether or not it's helping me to deal with the slings and arrows that have come our way. I have a lot to be thankful for. Aside from a few health issues that come with advancing age, Linda and I are happy to be living here on Bainbridge Island, where we have so many places to take woodland and seaside walks. Soon our younger son and family will return from Mexico, where they've been living for the past 6 years. Whether my particular philosophy of life will be helpful for others, many of whom are dealing with more serious issues, I cannot say. But it has stood the test of time because it draws upon the wisdom of the Stoic philosophers of ancient Greece and Rome. I call it the art of life. In his book, Walden, Henry Thoreau wrote, "Nowadays there are professors of philosophy, but not philosophers. To be a philosopher is not merely to have subtle thoughts, but to so love wisdom as to live according to its dictates, a life of simplicity, independence, magnanimity, and trust. It is to solve some of the problems of life, not only theoretically, but practically." I can relate to that. Although I consider myself a student of philosophy, I find a lot of it to be academic and abstract, produced, as Thoreau would have it, by professors of philosophy rather than philosophers in his sense of the term. Instead of Kant and Hegel and Whitehead, give me Lao Tzu, the Buddha, and Marcus Aurelius, whose writings have inspired countless readers over the millennia. Travelers know that it's helpful to have a guidebook. Spiritual seekers know this too, and have turned to such literature as Hitchhiker's Guides to the Soul. There are quite a number of them, actually. Not only the Tao Te Ching, the Dhammapada, and the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, but also the Analects of Confucius, the Enchiridion of Epictetus, the Bhagavad Gita, the poems of Rumi, and so many others. All of them compact, portable, and full of wisdom. When I'm troubled and anxious, as I have been during the past 3 years, I turn to this literature for guidance, especially the writings of the Stoics. Contrary to the popular stereotype of being aloof and unemotional, the Stoics were very much involved in the affairs of everyday life. At day's end, they took stock of the problems that arose, focusing on what is under our control and what is not. While we cannot always control what happens, to us, we can control our inner judgments and how we respond to life's events. Much of our worry and anxiety are caused by the things that are out of our power to control. Although there's much to tell about the Stoics and the practical methods they taught, there are three core ideas that I think about a lot. The first is called the view from above. The second is the present only is our happiness. And the third is live according to nature. So what do these mean? Marcus Aurelius is universally regarded as the greatest of the Roman emperors. Of course, one could say he didn't have much competition. But he was esteemed for his fairness, his humanity, and his wisdom. He was often away from Rome, commanding forces, defending the northern borders from invaders. He kept a journal or notebook in which he wrote reminders to himself on how to conduct his life morally and spiritually. It was never intended for publication, but those close to him found wisdom in these so-called meditations and wanted to share them with others. Eventually, they were arranged in chapter and verse. In the first chapter, Antoninus, as he was called, thanked his teachers and mentors by names and tells what he has learned from them. The first verse of the second chapter, which is the beginning of his philosophy of life, has always stuck in my mind. It gives us an example of what is meant by the view from above. At the start of the day, tell yourself, I shall meet people who are officious, ungrateful, abusive, treacherous, malicious, and selfish. In every case, they've got like this because of their ignorance of good and bad. But I have seen goodness and badness for what they are, and I know that what is good is morally right and what is bad is morally wrong. And I've seen the true nature of the wrongdoer himself, and I know that he is related to me, not in the sense that we share blood and seed, but by virtue of the fact that we both partake of the same intelligence, and so a portion of the divine. None of them can harm me anyway, because none of them can infect me with immorality, nor can I become angry with someone who's related to me, or hate him because we were born to work together, like feet or hands or eyelids, or like the rows of upper and lower teeth. To work against each other is therefore unnatural, and anger and rejection count as working against. Not only is this good advice, but it comes from someone who did not need to suffer fools. The verse is remarkable for the fact that Antoninus was able to manage his temper by viewing the essential humanity of friends and foes alike. As a society, we have become so tribalized that it is difficult to find common ground with people that we consider insurrectionists, racists, and worse. We must continue to affirm the worth and dignity of every person, even those we may strongly disagree with. The view from above also applies, as Antoninus suggests, to everyday issues, such as when we find ourselves irritated in traffic, impatient with people who seem slow or indecisive, or angry with those who break the rules. Not only is this futile, it also disturbs our peace of mind. Recall the story of the two monks who came to a river. Seeing a woman who was afraid to cross, one of them carried her to the other side. Sometime later, the one monk said to the other, "I can't believe you helped that woman." The other monk replied, "Are you still carrying her? I put her down after we crossed the river." The view from above is also important for reminding us of our moral principles when we are inclined to take our privileges for granted and perhaps find ourselves complicit in harm done to others. The present alone is our happiness is the second injunction I try to take to heart Again, I turn to Antoninus, who writes, all of those things you pray to get in the due course of your life, you can have them now if you don't deny yourself them. What you have to do is leave the past behind, entrust the future to providence, and focusing on the present alone, direct it toward piety and justice. Piety so that you embrace your lot, seeing that it was nature that brought you to it and it to you, and justice so that you speak the truth without restriction or equivocation and act in conformity with law and equity. Don't let anything stand in your way, such as someone else's iniquity or what people think or say. The present is the only thing we truly possess. The past is gone, and the future is yet to be. Happiness can only be found in the present. It is nothing more or less than that moment in which we are wholly aware. It is eternity in an hour, the universe in a grain of sand. Only that day dawns to which we are awake, Thoreau said. In eternity, there is indeed something true and sublime, but all these times and places and occasions are now and here. God culminates in the present moment and never will be more divine in the lapse of all the ages. So much of life is given over to completing tasks, running errands, and meeting the needs of others. We mortgage our present to the future, thinking that someday we'll have paid our debt and then can begin to live. Thich Nhat Hanh, a Buddhist monk who died recently, said, peace is right here and now, in ourselves and in everything we do and see. The question is whether or not we are in touch with it. We don't have to travel far away to enjoy the blue sky. We don't have to leave our city or even our neighborhood to enjoy the eyes of a beautiful child. Even the air we breathe can be a source of joy. Everything that we do can be done in a way that allows us to be in touch with the abundance of happiness that is available. We are very good at preparing to live, but not very good at living. We live life on a layaway plan and have difficulty remembering that we are alive in the present moment, the only moment there is for us to be alive. Every breath we take, every step we make can be filled with peace, joy, and serenity. We only need to be awake, alive in the present moment. This brings me to the third important Stoic injunction. Live according to nature. Stoicism, like other schools of ancient philosophy, is essentially therapeutic. It diagnoses our dis-ease and prescribes a cure in the form of spiritual exercises, including meditation, reading, conversation with friends, and especially walks in nature. We're all aware of the healing properties of nature. When I'm walking on sidewalks, it's usually because I'm on a mission, headed to the store or the ferry. But when I'm walking in the woods or along the seashore, I'm doing this activity for its own sake. Linda and I are fortunate to live near two woodland walks, the Jim Nelson Trail and Sakai Park. When I step off the sidewalk and onto these paths, I feel an immediate sense of relief. My heartbeat slows, I breathe more deeply, and my senses come alive. As Emerson wrote in his book, Nature, in the woods, a man casts off his years as the snake its slough, and at whatsoever period of his life is always a child. In the woods is perpetual youth. Living in this region, we are blessed to have so many opportunities to take advantage of what nature has to offer. Living in accordance with nature also means observing the rhythms of nature and adjusting our lives accordingly. We are, after all, products of nature, which sustains us and meets our needs if we keep in right relations with it. More is to be gained by going with the flow than by resisting it. Living according to nature also means harnessing the forces of nature, using the wind, for example, to fill a sail, or the sun and water to produce energy. Nature also teaches us that violations of her laws can produce disastrous consequences, as we are witnessing today with the rise of global temperatures due to the buildup of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, leading to droughts, wildflowers, extreme weather events, and the extinction of species. Nature may lift our spirits and aid our efforts, but we must never forget that nature bats last. There's more to Stoicism than I've mentioned here, but these are some of the Stoic principles that have sustained me over the last 3 years. For the ancient Greeks and Romans, philosophy was a way of life, or as some would call it, the art of living. Now, there is no philosophy or religion that will inoculate us from heartache and disappointment. None can protect us from pain and loss. We suffer because we live. But there is wisdom and guidance that can bring peace of mind to troubled souls. Some find it in Buddhism, some in the teachings of Jesus and other saints and sages. When I am worried and anxious, I often turn to the Stoics, whose philosophy is summed up in the familiar serenity prayer. May we find courage to change what can be changed, serenity to accept what cannot be changed, and wisdom to know the difference. So may it be. I'd like to invite you to join in singing our closing hymn, For the Earth.
You may rise as you are willing and able, and if we could all turn to 163, Audrey will lead us in. For the earth forever turning, for the skies for every sea, for our lives, for all we cherish, for song of peace. For the mountains, hills, and pastures, for their silent majesty, for the stars, for all the heavens, sing we our joyful song of peace. For the sun, for rain and thunder, for the seasons harmony, for our lives, for all creation, sing we our joyful praise to thee. Just 3 times through, so thank you all.
Well, I guess you're up next.
Please repeat after me as I extinguish our flaming chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of hope. The warmth of community or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
And I leave you this morning with these words from Storm Jameson, who writes, There is only one world, the world pressing against you at this minute. There is only 1 minute in which you are alive, this minute, here and now. The only way to live is by accepting each minute as an unrepeatable miracle. So may it be.